Hey there, self-care warriors. Welcome back to Self-Care Haven. Before I even begin with the video, I wanted to show you guys my new warrior necklace. I thought this was going to be really apt for this video. And I just love it, so I hope that it cheers you up and brings a smile to your face. Today I wanted to talk to you about an ingrained habit that survivors of narcissistic abuse in childhood with narcissistic parents often encounter and internalize, and often bring out in their adulthood when they meet other narcissists or when they meet other toxic people, right? So what happens in childhood is that if we grew up with a narcissistic parent, we probably were compelled to protect the abuser in order to survive. And by protect, I mean it can happen in a number of different ways. It could mean protecting the reputation of the family by keeping silent about the abuse. It could range from not reporting crimes or not reporting a history of abuse among family members because you were too afraid to speak out. It could extend to maybe even sexual abuse in the most horrific cases where there are narcissistic or sociopathic parents with no boundaries and they have sexually abused their children and you were a victim of that. You may have been told to keep quiet about that by other family members who wanted to maintain the status quo, who wanted to make sure that you never spoke out about that type of abuse. And so it never got exposed, it never came to the surface as an issue, and it instead bubbled up inside of you, and it instead had an impact on you and terrorized you and traumatized you, because narcissists and toxic people thrive on the silence of their victims, right? So when we've been taught to be silent about the abuse, when we've been taught that no one will help us, that no one would ever believe us, that the abuse didn't occur, that we are at fault for the abuse, or that our reactions to the abuse discount or dismiss or minimize the effects of their abusive behavior, we learn to accept that as fact, as reality. And so as children, as vulnerable children growing up in these types of toxic households with a narcissistic parent and perhaps the victim parent who may have tried to keep you silent about the abuse happening, or maybe you were lucky to have a very validating parent who was the victim and he or she was able to comfort you through the abuse, validate you, and serve as a source of support throughout your witnessing of that sort of domestic violence situation, or throughout the abuse that you endured during that dynamic, right? But what happens is that when we've been taught to keep silent in order to protect the abuser, in order to anticipate and meet and cater to the needs of the abuser, what happens? We as vulnerable children grow up to believe that our experiences are less important, are less meaningful, are less of a reality than the realities of our oppressors, our terrorizers. Isn't that interesting? And I came to this insight not by myself, but through the help of someone else, the insights of someone else who I confided in about this sort of dynamic, about how we are programmed to serve the needs of abusers at such a very young age that we carry on that habit in adulthood. And they told me, is there a part of you that feels like your experience is less meaningful than your abusers? And I had to pause right there, because there it was, the reality. That is what we've been taught since childhood, that our experiences are less meaningful than the ones of our oppressors. We're always worried about our abusers, right? We're worried about making them happy. We're worried about catering to them, protecting them, making sure that they're okay, that they're comfortable. When have they ever protected us? When have they ever made sure that we felt comfortable? When have they ever hesitated to hurt us? When have they ever paused and thought, maybe I should have empathy for this person? Maybe I should treat this person better? I'll tell you, usually never, right? The only times that they've ever even thought of us is how can they serve us so that we remain a good source of supply to them. So when we carry that toxic kind of people-pleasing habit from childhood to adulthood, and again, this is not as much of a toxic habit as it is a survival mechanism in childhood, but it can become maladaptive and toxic in adulthood if we carry it forth, right? So in adulthood, we're meeting these toxic people, toxic friends, toxic family members, relatives, or relationship partners. And the way we interact with them is by remembering and internalizing and putting forth the philosophy that we have to somehow protect them, we have to make them feel comfortable, we have to make sure that our experiences remain less meaningful, less important than their experience, even though we're the ones being abused and terrorized and invalidated. And because we develop that habit of protecting our abuser from a very young age, we tend to get into relationships with other types of emotionally abusive people, and we anticipate their needs, we cater to their needs, we protect them, and we falsify the depth to which they abuse us. We falsify and minimize and deny and rationalize the effects of their abuse. And until we reconnect with that authentic level of disgust, of anger, of our sense of reality that this is not okay, we won't be able to set healthy boundaries with ourselves and others, because what we need to do is take all that compassion and empathy that we're feeling for our abusers and all that protection that we put upon them and realize that we have to protect ourselves. We have to show compassion towards ourselves. This doesn't mean that we are vindictive or that we try to harm the abuser in any way. It's more just about protecting ourselves and remembering that we also have rights, we also have boundaries that we need to treat as sacred vows to ourselves, and that our experience is just as meaningful, just as important as anybody else's, right? Especially over those who have oppressed us, have terrorized us, have harmed us, right? Especially then, because that is when there is a power dynamic at play, and you just can't treat it as if it's two normal people interacting, because this person is out to harm you, this person is out to invalidate you, this person is out to abuse you. So it's important to strike a balance between any sort of empathy that we feel for an abusive person and compassion for ourselves, thinking about ourselves, remembering that our reality is just as important, just as meaningful, just as amazing, just as hurtful, just as, in depth as anybody else, is just as rich. And we don't have to protect people who terrorize us, right? We don't have to protect them from the consequences of their actions. We don't have to necessarily even make them feel comfortable about facing those consequences. Again, we don't have to be vindictive, but we don't have to think about them first always and prioritize them when we are the ones being abused. So I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this topic. Have there been times when you've protected your abuser, whether in childhood or adulthood? If in adulthood, where do you think you learned that habit? Do you think that it happened within the trauma cycle of that particular relationship, or did it happen because of something that occurred to you in childhood? I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Let me know if there are some ways that you've broken through this habit and learned to protect yourself, learn to respect yourself, learn to set boundaries, healthy boundaries with yourself and others. And I hope that you're working on any negative self-talk or negative self-blame, self-judgment that we as survivors all go through after this abuse experience and during it. And we develop that record in our heads that tell us that we are to blame, that our experiences are less valid than anybody else's. We need to stop that, right? We need to curb that negative self-talk. So I hope you're working on that as well. And I look forward to hearing your wisdom, your insights, and I always appreciate your comments. So thank you again for all of your support. I look forward to hearing from you. Until next time, take care.